You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back to the show, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Pete Bianco, who is the president and CEO of OsteoApp.ai. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Thanks, Dr. Roxy. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I am really excited about today's conversation because I think that you have accomplished quite a few milestones. Although you are still early in your journey, you've had some successes that I think will be so inspiring and encouraging to the health innovation community. So before I get into my questions that I've prepared for today, just tell our audience a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating these days.
Sure. So I started out as an engineer. I'm an engineer in MBA, and the totality of my career has been in the musculoskeletal space, orthopedics in particular. Started out in research in total hip arthroplasty, moved into industry, worked for J&J for many years. Took over responsibility in marketing, product management for a major total hip replacement product line. And during the course of that, came up with an idea that was a .com spinoff that I spun off of J&J with J&J Development Corp and several venture firms, and sold that to Medtronic in 2002. It's quite a while ago. It's doing the .com thing. It was the first orthopedic specific patient engagement tool that we brought to the market and put it out there. And then we got hammered by the .com bubble like everyone else. But but I got the bug, the startup bug from there. And
that was early.
Very early, yeah. And since then, I've been at the nexus of early stage musculoskeletal technologies and business development, and in various roles, either an investor or in a startup. But this new project is one that kind of landed in my lap 2 years ago at a confluence of some very exciting developments in the market relative to uncovering undiagnosed patients with osteoporosis with a proven technology out of Europe and combining it with artificial intelligence. And now at the point where we're ready to scale this into the marketplace to address this horrific disease and chronically underdiagnosed sector of the market.
Well, how exciting to have such a unique opportunity to really transform healthcare. I think that's also part of what I'm so excited about in your story and what you guys are doing. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are innovating amazing things, but you know, it's really not going to transform the industry as much as I think something like yours will. So just talk a little bit about the product that you're bringing to market.
Right. So we're spinning a technology out of a publicly traded PACS company from Sweden called Sectra, that they had developed a technology that essentially from a digital X-ray of the hand isolates the second, third, and fourth metacarpal, and in 30 runs an algorithm, and in 30 seconds comes back with an osteoporosis T-score and a report. Now that whole process is proprietary, a proprietary system that integrates into the clinical workflow. And we looked at that technology, and when they launched it in Europe, it's in use in Europe now. There's a tremendous body of peer-reviewed literature behind it. Mm-hmm. And when I, kind of in a serendipitous way, how this all came about was even before I knew about this technology, I received a contact from the tech transfer group at the University of Rochester here in Rochester, New York, where I am. And they were working on an artificial intelligence algorithm that was very similar to the function of that. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking at it with Dr. Hammert. I said, I'll take a look at this from a commercial standpoint and see if there's legs to this. And I started realizing with my background in orthopedics that, osteoporosis and bone mineral density have always been an issue, but nothing that anybody ever really focused on as being a factor in influencing outcomes of orthopedic procedures. And yet it does tremendously. I mean, just talk to any surgeon about a periprosthetic fracture and what, hell it is to repair something like that. Sure. Well, that's caused by osteoporosis. And I think we're starting to see literature that supports that. So I looked at it and I thought, this is a very important and interesting concept. And, from an artificial intelligence standpoint, the algorithm is the easy part. It's the data that's the hard part, right? And so literally, talk about serendipity. 2 years ago, I was walking down the aisle of the PAX vendors at the last Orthopedic Academy meeting that was held live. And I thought, since this is all X-ray based, I bet a PAX company would know something about this. And I just happened to walk into the sector booth.
Wow.
And said, blah, 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 hand X-rays, blah, 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 osteoporosis, and wait right here. And 2 minutes later, I'm standing toe to toe with the CEO of the company, and we started talking, and he thought, their business was taking off. This was becoming something they didn't want to focus on anymore specifically. It needed specific focus. So we combined the two together, and we started working it, really a hybrid model of a non-AI proven product in the market already, combining it with artificial intelligence to enhance it and expand it to a larger data set of X-rays.
So what a incredible jump start to the to the commercialization process. When you think about other innovators out there that are having to build the technology, having to go through FDA approval, having to develop, maybe do piloting for years to develop, or maybe even longer, to be able to acquire that type of evidence to substantiate the claims that they're making. And it sounds like what you're saying is that, with this collaboration between the two entities melded into one offer, that you've been able to leverage all of the great things that they've already done, and then pair that with something very revolutionary to take to the US market.
That's right. And I kind of equate it to being shot out of a cannon. I mean, it's the technology.
In the best way.
Yeah, in the best way. It's like, and we did get hammered and delayed by the pandemic, obviously, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise in one respect.
Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about that later. But
sure.
It really having this platform and having a major company backing you, we decided to pilot this in 3 medical centers. They come on in staggered form, but the first one is a major medical center on the East Coast. The second one is a large private practice in New England, the largest group private practice in New England, orthopedic practice. And the other is an affiliated specialty hand center in the Mid-Atlantic in the Baltimore area.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one in Boston, large academic center, downtown Boston. We've just now finished that pilot, and it's been very successful. And one of the just by, again, serendipity, happened to come across the thought leader in this area, and I'll mention Dr. Tamara Rosenthal at Beth Israel Deaconess, really saw the value in this, in that she fixes a lot of distal radius fractures, wrist fractures in patients.
Okay.
And she routinely screens those patients. If you're 50 or older and you have a wrist fracture, you more than likely have osteoporosis. And she started screening her patients years ago by sending them out for a DEXA scan, which is the current gold standard, but it takes 6 weeks. They're old, it's inconvenient, and a lot of times they don't show up and she doesn't get the data back. And we presented an opportunity to her with a proven technology to give her an accurate T-score, an osteoporosis reading of that patient from the diagnostic X-ray she's looking at before she actually operates on the patient. So that, her eyes were like this. So,
that's fast.
Yeah. So we've gone through a very successful pilot with her, just looking at distal radius fractures. Our other sites now are looking at any patient that is in the zone of requiring screening or should be screened, whether they fractured or not. We're starting to look at that now. We're starting to find our ability to find thousands of patients potentially that have no idea that they have osteoporosis until they fracture. And that's really the crux of what we're trying to get at, is that 75% of people that are at risk for a fracture due to osteoporosis have no idea that they're at risk. And so we have a really unique tool to find these people before they do that.
Wish I would have had that available for my friend. I'm in this women's group, and one of my really good friends, probably about 57 years old, just walking down the sidewalk, tripped over like her shoe, broke her wrist, and it's been a nightmare for her. So painful, so excruciating, and just completely unaware that she was at risk.
Well, the problem
of walking down the street,
right. And wrist fractures are an inconvenience and they're painful. But if you've had an osteoporotic wrist fracture, you're at risk for a vertebral or hip fracture. Your risk for that goes up tremendously. in the literature, there's a very clear line between the two, a connection between the two. So if we can catch them before they fracture or after they have a wrist fracture and prevent that next fracture that could, can be lethal in some cases, we've done our job. And we think that we're going to bend the curve on this horrific disease. And it's a global epidemic now. And with the aging population, it's just going to get worse.
Sure. So I want to kind of dive deep into the pilot plan or the pilot strategy.
Sure.
So a lot of times when I'm talking to innovators, you'll think that more pilots are better, and then it becomes really difficult to manage 10 or 12 pilots across the country. There's a gap between being able to find someone to say yes to pilots, right? So there's the challenge there. And then when the pilots are running, negotiating sales during that process or after that process, once they demonstrate the claims that they're making, to be able to get cash flow coming in. So obviously you are maybe in a different position with having some funding from the parent company. But talk a little bit about what that experience was like, maybe some lessons learned around piloting that you can share with our audience.
Sure. And, to be honest with you, we didn't have a plan.
No way.
We got pulled. Yep. When I showed this to our team, they got it right away. We want to try this. And so this was originally deployed in Europe in mammography centers as a secondary image to having a breast exam.
Okay.
And what came out of one site in Europe adapted this in an orthopedic clinic for finding, sorting, and intervening in patients and focusing on the ones that really needed to be focused on after they had a fracture. And that's the model that we were taking from Europe and applying it in the United States. Of course, you're running from a socialized medicine system into a fee-for-service system. So our real approach was the technology's proven. That's not the issue. And we know it's efficacious, not the issue. The issue is, how do we integrate it into your workflow? And how do we get paid without violating the Stark laws, blah, 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 right?
Yep.
So we just kind of forgot all that, just said, let's just put it in, let's just see what happens. And we did that. And with some guide rails, but not many. It's just like, here, play with it. And, we'll touch base with you now and then and see what happens. And both sites in Boston, almost to the day simultaneously, came back to us and said, don't ever think about taking this product away from us.
The pilot is not ending.
Yeah. But then it was a matter of a unique phenomenon came out of this, which is also, I think, a side effect of the pandemic, is that patients are willing to pay out of pocket now for convenience items and things that, like this, when the surgeon says, hey, look, you've had a fracture, or I'm concerned about your bone health. I just took an x-ray of your hand for some other reason. In 30 seconds, I can tell you what your T-score is. And I'd really like to know, because I think it's important to you.
And by the way, we pay for that out of pocket.
And they'll, boom. I mean, and, it's not universal, but it saves them the hassle of going to get a DEXA scan. I mean, we're not trying to eliminate DEXA. Let's put that on the table. Okay. What I think we're trying to do here is find patients that would never get to a DEXA scanner that really should, right? And push them towards that ultimate, secondary confirmatory test. However, our site in Boston is now saying, I'm never sending patients to DEXA again. So you've got that. But I think that we're in a pretty good position now. We're getting pulled. Like today, like I told you, I'm meeting with a surgeon here locally who's heard about us, wants to do this. And the model that we're exploring right now is a revenue share with orthopedic practices, so that they can actually find new sources of revenue by offering this service as well. So
how is that being worked? How are you navigating that with so many practices being owned by hospital systems? Are you targeting the private practices specifically for that revenue share model?
I think that's where we'll get the fastest take up on it. But honestly, we're seeing even at our big sites, academic sites, they're willing to do that. They like this idea. They think it's that important. Before the pandemic, most of those sites would have said, it's a hassle, I don't want to deal with that. I think after the pandemic, even large academic centers realized that the vulnerabilities of the fee-for-service model in healthcare has got them rethinking a lot of things as far as revenue sources and such. And, we started out thinking, oh, we got to get a CPT code, We're kind of not so sure about that anymore because it's kind of a race to the bottom on pricing. And we think that this is valuable enough and important enough that there's revenue there out of pocket. And also some of the other capabilities we have are to be able to go into existing data sets of x-rays in a hospital or clinic or wherever and go through 3 years of x-rays and come out with a population health profile of osteoporosis based on a digital x-ray of patients they've already seen. And so
So part of what I see since you navigating is, characteristically, when you're bringing a revolutionary or novel innovation to market, there's certain strategic decisions that just make sense, right? And when you're thinking about your pricing strategy, there's typically a substantial amount of R&D that's gone into the development of this. And so you're charging a premium for that in the beginning. There's nothing else in the market, right? Why not? You can, not gouging people, but you're recouping those costs up front. So you're charging a premium. And if you go to the traditional route with a CPT code, you're completely eliminating that opportunity to be able to charge that premium price that you would normally for a revolutionary novel solution.
That's right. And you hit the nail on the head. And but what we're looking at is a volume business here. We're now in the process of finishing off distribution agreements that give us global reach, right? And this is a huge, huge problem in the world. So we think we're going to have a lot of flexibility on pricing based on volume. That's one theory. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Really. But that's what we're thinking. But yeah, you're right. It's interesting. It's a bit of a difficult story to tell initially, but once the connections are made, the willingness to pay a premium comes to the front pretty quickly because they understand how timely this is, how accurate it is, and their ability to intervene to prevent a devastating and costly fracture for payers, for IDNs, everybody involved, especially the patient, is becoming, there's some real awareness starting to open up now, as we're seeing in some of the communications from the National Osteoporosis Foundation and things like that they're starting to get onto this idea that there are other technologies out there that could really help this problem. Let's start looking at these and embracing them. So we feel very optimistic. It makes
you think of like the plasma TV market, right? They're definitely for volume, or were in the, at some point, but you've got those early adopters that see the vision and want it because no one else has, want it because they know that it's going to make a difference for their patients and are really willing to pay that premium.
Right.
So as you kind of just go back to the pilot, so you're talking a lot about serendipity, but if you just look back in hindsight, is there anything, lessons learned or any recommendations or guidance that you would have for other innovators that are in the trenches that maybe aren't experiencing some of that serendipity? What are some of the things that you think that they need to do to navigate that pilot process or plan upfront to make sure that they benefit in the most optimal way?
Well, I think it's real recognition of how hard it is. It's a steep hill. You got to convince them to do it. And since it's an IT play, you've got to deal with, there's that layer of hospital, system IT you got to get through. Yeah. So you have to be realistic, I think, about the timeline and what you really want to get out and set attainable goals that are not, out of reach or crazy. Stretch goals in a pilot, I think, are a recipe for disaster in my mind. So it's just, doctor, we just want you to do this, and that's a success. And when you reach that milestone, then let's go to the next one. And so, kind of doing it a little bit incrementally, the way we did it, and having the patients. And in our case, we were lucky; we had the ability to have the patients from time, the time standpoint. But it also, very interestingly enough, the time was forced upon us due to the pandemic, but it allowed us to pivot and think really hard about all of these things relative to the pilots of being realistic and, little incremental successes are big successes. They translate into big successes down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit.
So you guys just made an announcement not too long ago about a partnership around distribution. So let's talk about your distribution strategy and how that is helping you scale faster. And
Right.
it seems like it's a really early decision to make. And I imagine that that's because you're being shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. So our first real distribution announcement that I can say publicly is Oxos Medical, which is a red hot little startup out of Atlanta. Great team that's come up with a portable X-ray device, handheld. It's got a plate and a handheld thing that you click and point at that and take a hand X-ray. Right now, I think it's only cleared for use in the upper extremity. But it brings portability to this issue of, right now our system works on any installed X-ray system in the world. We can do it anywhere, install it in a PACS behind the firewall at a hospital is the way it kind of works right now. But this allows us to containerize it and embed it on the machine itself. So we don't have to, we can bypass a hospital network, or if there's unstable Wi-Fi, we don't have to have a direct connection to the cloud in order for it to work. And so that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities of delivering this in an ASC, ambulatory surgery center, an orthopedic clinic in an easy way, another piece of ancillary equipment that's just sitting in the corner of the exam room. But what we're really most excited about is deploying this into community centers, nursing homes, wellness clinics, retail clinics, and that sort of thing. It really opens up some really big possibilities for this technology.
So it sounds like your part of your go-to-market strategy is this distribution path. So you're just make sure I got it right. So you're going direct to consumer. You're also going direct to the practice, and then you've also got channel partner strategy in place.
Yeah, and the other part of our channel partner strategy is through established global players like Sectra. That have 2,000 PACS installations worldwide. So we're talking to them about
why not? That's why not? It's smart.
Well, and they've got experience with this technology, and they know it better than anyone. So and they're very excited about this development. They want this technology to succeed and get into the market, and they're doing everything they can to help us do that. And that's opening up their channels to us is one major strategy, and it literally shooting us out of a cannon, this puts a rocket on our rear end as well. And, so off we go. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So we've had some conversations about the story, and, coming from such a strong marketing background, I totally value the power of storytelling and the role that plays in commercialization, even though it's maybe a bit softer than the hardcore sales plan. But help us understand what are some of the things that maybe you're facing as you're crafting and telling the story around osteoporosis, the mainstream market versus early adopters, and maybe being forced to educate the market, not necessarily about the problem, but about this revolutionary solution that's available to them.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because the technology sells by itself once the connections are made, and it's making those connections that are hard.
The light bulb moment.
Yeah, the light bulb moment. And the real challenge in not only in the United States, in Europe too, we saw the same thing in Europe. There's no one specialty that owns osteoporosis. That's the problem, right? It's it's an orphan disease that, as a result, because it is, patients, 75% of patients that are at risk have no idea. And that's largely because nobody has ownership of this, right? So how do you get these patients to where they need to go if nobody owns it, right? So that's really the challenge. And what we think we're about to do is catalyze a clear clinical pathway enhanced by a technology that will catalyze ownership. And what you see right now is in various centers, fracture liaison services that are the catch-all of patients that have had a fracture are flagged and sent to these internal groups that coordinate amongst multiple specialties and functions within a hospital or within a treatment team. What we like to do is think of this as a pre-fracture liaison opportunity, in that instead of waiting for people to fracture, we're able to find them and catalyze them. And we think a couple of different things are going to drive that. One, we're able to generate revenues for that institution by doing this, right? And which
is a huge issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And then, osteoporosis patients today fall through every single conceivable gap in care you can think of, right? And so we are really focused on closing those gaps. And we think that this technology will help catalyze our ability to do that. And so that's the real challenge. It's nobody owns it. I mean, orthopedic surgeons know that this is a problem. They have a large effort within the orthopedic community for several years now called Own the Bone, where, we really need to do a better job of finding these patients, but they're not incentivized to treat them, right? And so if they don't find them, they can't refer them. So what we're finding is that there's a real strong willingness to find these patients if it's an automated way. By the way, this all works seamlessly in the workflow. It's automated. They don't have to do anything. And they find these patients, they go, oh, Mrs. Jones, here's your T-score. I'm sending you back to your PCP, or I'm sending you to my endocrinologist colleague down the hall. You really need to be looked at. And we think that alone is going to change the curve on this disease. So that's, it is a challenge because of, underlying all this, nobody owns this disease from a specialty standpoint.
So sounds like not maybe as much as the story is the issue, is just the target market and kind of how that point of awareness, that point of creating demand and identifying that most ideal point to be able to drive that.
Right. And I think, and one thing we're seeing is that, patients, when they're educated, are motivated. Right? Mrs. Jones, you've got osteoporosis, right? And boom, they suddenly take charge of this. There's a lot of, and then let's face it, this, postmenopausal women are the ones that suffer from this the most. And there's a lot of women out there who want to keep active and they don't want to break a hip or wrist.
No, not at all.
Yeah, who does, right? So just having that piece of information in a timely way given to them by their healthcare professional is game changing as far as this disease is concerned. And that's kind of what we're seeing in our pilots, and that's what that's the bet we're placing, honestly.
All kinds of marketing campaigns are coming to mind. That's really interesting. You almost have the opportunity to kind of create the Susan Norman of breast cancer around this from a consumer standpoint. At one point that didn't even happen. There was no awareness, no demand. And then all of a sudden, that's just steamrolled into something that's a, global phenomenon.
Yeah, we thought of that. And again, coming back to practicality, you have to start at the entry point where these patients are discovered in orthopedics, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so
otherwise it's very costly.
Right. You can have you got to have a big vision. Yeah, but you have to have tactical steps to get to that vision. And so I agree with you completely that this technology could play an important role in raising awareness overall. Great. I want to get there. But right now it's like we got to plant that point of the spear and start getting some use cases and some proof of concept of the model.
Sure.
Which I'm very, very, very confident in now. I am. It's really great. So but again, if there's any lesson in all of this for me, it's really incremental steps. Serendipity plays a big role, and when it happens, just go with it. And small successes become big successes later on. I think that's really the issue.
Okay. So the last question that I have for you before we wrap up here is just about funding. So just kind of describe your funding journey, some of the challenges that you faced, where you are now, and any advice that you also have just regarding funding for our audience.
Well, we're kind of
it's a lot of fun, isn't it, Pete?
I hate raising money. Everybody wants to focus on building the business, but it's something we have to do. We're raising an 8 million Series A. And we're leveraging that off of a $5 million R&D investment that Sector had already made in the technology. So as we're not a traditional startup. We have a CE mark, 510K cleared, blah, 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 blah. So we hired an outside banker to help us put this together. And so we're going through the process of, we have plenty of investors. What we're doing is being very selective about who the lead investor is. And because we want someone strategic, someone who shares the vision, someone who gets it, not just a blank check and that sort of thing, but a real,
because not all money is good money.
And we've gone through all that too, and so we've been very, fortunately, I've been able to fund most of this myself, and as we're going through the process, and I did that intentionally because I wanted to hold it back until I felt like we had what we needed to go out and raise money. I will say, though, we were about to raise money March of last year, right when the pandemic hit. And so we pulled back. Stories. We pulled back. I thought it was going to be like 2008 all over again. I was completely wrong about that.
Right.
Funding kept going. But we started thinking about it going, okay, let's pivot, and we've done a series of pivots, but the amplitude of the pivots are getting smaller. We intentionally did that because we could. And so now when we decided to relaunch our campaign, we were in a really strong position to do that and increasing our value. So we're very, very confident we're coming down the wire here. But, we have the benefit of being selective. And so we're doing that as well. So.
Okay. Excellent. So anything else that you want to share with our audience? You are a serial entrepreneur. You've got so much experience even beyond what you're doing today. As you kind of look back at that journey, is there any advice that you have for other entrepreneurs that are in the market that maybe this is their first time? Maybe they're an engineer or a clinician and never really even built a business before. Is there any, 2 or 3 takeaways that you would say, hey, be aware of this or mindful of this?
Somebody asked me this question a couple of weeks ago at a major medical institution, a venture arm of a major medical institution.
Yeah.
And a young kid who wanted to start his own company, and do all that. I love that. I love helping young.
Did you tell him run to do something else?
No, what I said to him was, believe in the vision. But what I do, I have a lot of people approach me all the time looking at new technologies. I say, your job early on is to find the fatal flaw and kill it, right? Find the fatal flaw and kill it, because you don't want to waste 5 years of your life chasing something that's going to run into a brick wall later on that you aren't even aware of. Young people like to get enamored with their technologies. They see stars in their eyes.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about, right? When you run into real investors, that's not what they care about, right?
Yeah.
So you have to mold yourself to the market that you're going into, and be ready to pull the plug if you find the fatal flaw, and recognize it when you see it, because you're going to waste a lot of your life on this if you don't, right?
So how do you detach yourself from that? Is there anything that you've gone through where you're kind of, a little bit more detached from that flaw that you identify that you might have held on to in previous versions of your career?
Well, it comes with experience. I've had more failures than successes. Let's just put it that way, right?
Haven't we all?
That's part of the journey.
Truth be told.
Yeah, that's part of the journey. If you're young, have the good sense to get seasoned advisors around you that will tell you the truth, right? And but when you're older, have seasoned advisors around you that are willing to tell you the truth. Right? It's nothing changes where that's concerned. You really need to find people who can help you, that have the relevant experience and can really guide you in that, and listen to people. Don't, I know it's hard to do because entrepreneurs are generally optimistic people. They see big visions. They're blue sky people. They want to help people. They want to do things, but you also have to have the good sense to know when enough is enough. But on the other side of it, that can wear you down, which it did for me until this came along. And you also have to have the good sense to be able to recognize a good thing when you see it and jump in with both feet, and sometimes just not think about it, just do it. This was one of those unique opportunities that it just, loudspeaker just blaring at me saying, you've got to do this one. So
your legacy.
That's what happened.
Yeah, it's your legacy. And I really wasn't joking. I talk about this statistic all the time that 95% of innovations that are brought to market fail. And these are not bad technology. These are amazing things that don't get common. Right? That don't get in the hands of the people that need them the most. So to be part of that 5% that succeeds and really leave your mark on the world and know that you're changing quality of life or maybe even saving lives is just so incredible. I mean, it just puts so much more purpose behind the work that we do and just our lives.
Well, that's why we do it, right? I mean, great. We want to do well. We want to support our families and do all that. But, there really is a larger mission here that's driving me and my team on this one, obviously. Yeah. So, but if you don't have that core philosophy of trying to do something good for the world, you'll never succeed in anything else, right? So it really does have to be at the core of the mission of the company, which it is for us, for OsteoApp.ai.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pete, how can folks get a hold of you if anyone wants to speak with you after the show?
Go to my LinkedIn page. We also have a LinkedIn page, OsteoApp.ai on LinkedIn. They can email me at ptbianco@osteoapp.ai. And I'm pretty responsive on email. I'm always open to networking and talking to entrepreneurs that are going through similar things. I lean on a lot of other people in my entrepreneurial network, and I'm happy to help people do that as well as they're going down the path of trying to figure out how to get their products launched or whatever the issue is that they're dealing with. If I can help, I'm more than happy to.
Terrific. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, sharing your journey and all of the great wisdom and insight.
Thanks, Dr. Roxy. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.